EJ, I come before you today, a humbled man, because I forgot rule number one of predicting playoff games, which is if you go on the road to an alien quarterback and you have a rookie, you should not bet that team to cover. So I apologize to Bills fans everywhere. I thought Buffalo was going to win. I thought Denver was going to cover. And, that looked good for like 5 minutes of that game. So, we're starting off playoffs strong here each. How are you doing? Probably better than me.
I'm good. We both said we thought the Bills were going to win. We both thought that game was going to be a little bit closer, but we did get some things right about Wildcard weekend. We're going to talk about those things to open the show, and then we're going to give a preview of the divisional round, which is let's go. Divisional football round is one of the best weekends of NFL content on the calendar. It is all the good teams that are left going head to head. We've got some great battles. Hopefully we'll get some more things right about these games.
It is the best weekend of football of the year, in my opinion, because, wild card round, especially lately since they added a 7 seed, like a lot of the games in the wild card round, especially this year, just not super competitive. Division round is mostly always very competitive. Some of my favorite football games ever were division round games because this is, best of the best, cream of the crop going at it. I will say the theme of wildcard weekend, which is probably going to carry itself over to division round Saturday and Sunday. And this is something I've really come to understand over the last few years. The floor of a football team is set by their offensive line and defensive line play. If you have good offensive line and defensive line play, you can make the playoffs. You can be a really good football team. So trenches establish the floor, quarterback establishes the ceiling. And we saw that in several games in wildcard weekend. We talked about how the Packers were way better in the trenches than people give them credit for. That defense kept them in the game for way longer than they probably should have been. Like their trenches established the floor of that team, which is hanging with the Eagles. Their ceiling, though, was lowered because of their really shitty quarterback play. Then you got the Commanders, who I did not think were going to win that game. And their floor is lower because their trench play is nowhere near the Buccaneers, but their ceiling, like they literally hit their ceiling in that game because Jaden Daniels was so spectacular. So I kind of look at it as the lower end and the higher end of a team's potential is established by those two things. Trench play is the floor, quarterback play is the ceiling. It's really hard to make the divisional round without good quarterback play because that you kind of have to be hitting your ceiling to make it that far. And I would say that kind of bore itself out in the division round because all the quarterbacks left are really, really damn good.
And that's typically the way it works. I think that's a very wise way to look at it is this is what's going to establish your baseline, and then you need more things on top of that. And what we saw throughout the wild card weekend was teams that didn't have things getting exposed, whether that was offensive line play, whether that was roster depth, whether that was a suitable run game for, late in the year. It's not all outside games anymore, but you still have to be able to run the football to control the clock and to be able to bleed clock at the end of the game. And the Texans did that exactly. D'Amico's run defense, we called it out as being a key in the wild card preview. Chargers only rushed for 50 yards as a team. You're not going to win many playoff games rushing for 50 yards. I don't care how good your quarterback is. This is not a referendum on Justin Herbert. This is you got a Greg Roman team. You've invested in the offensive line. You got some good running backs, and you come out and get throttled like that in the ground game. Your options are limited. And what I was reminded of in this particular weekend is everybody says, the playoffs are more intense. It ratchets up, right? Well, what ratchets up? The physicality ratchets up. Holy crap. There were so many, big pro NFL moment hits in the weekend that won't even make the highlight reels. The physicality ratchets up and the time pressure. If you burn a possession, you start looking up at the clock and you don't go, this is what we have left in this game. You go, this is what we have left in our season. And you see that, and it's like a weight that sort of adds up on a team on the sideline. Like, oh, well, we had that possession, didn't work out. Wasn't a turnover, but it was a bad punt. Now field position, and everything just starts to mean a little bit more. Meanwhile, maniacs are out there like, well, this is it. I'm going to quote unquote leave it all on the field. And most teams did. And that creates an environment where mistakes get magnified. And if you can't sort of settle it down, get a couple of first downs running the ball, have a couple of scripted completions, and just sort of get back on track, it's like a snowball effect. And you just see teams start to get snowed under. And like you said, in the wild card round, there were a lot of uneven games. And as soon as a team started to slip, the other team smelled blood, and that was it. They just rolled them right off the field. And we saw that in the majority of games, not really the Bucs Commanders game, but just about every other game was you were really sure which team had the upper hand by about middle of the second quarter.
You mentioned, every single possession matters more in the postseason because like that's the end of your season. And, that was one of the things that I got wrong. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised about in wildcard weekend. Cause when we were talking about Commanders Bucks going into that game, I was like, hey, Commanders are used to getting 11.5 possessions per game on average. Right. And they're not a really efficient scoring team per possession, right? And the Bucks, meanwhile, like they bleed you out. They keep you under 10 possessions. And so it was going to be on Jaden Daniels to take 10 or fewer possessions, and keep up blow for blow with Baker Mayfield. They didn't give him 10 possessions. They gave Jaden Daniels 8 possessions in that game. And, all year long, not all year long, but since week 10, the second half of the season, they were scoring at about a 42% clip on their possessions. He scored at 62% against Tampa. So not only did he go blow for blow with the Tampa offense, who only had 7 possessions themselves, like nobody could get off the field in that game. It was just all these long, methodical drives. But he exceeded them. And, he got them in position to doink it through and move on. And Jaden elevated his team beyond what I think I certainly thought they were capable of against a very potent Tampa team. And hell, I'd bet there's a bunch of Commanders fans that are pleasantly surprised that we're, kind of chalking this one up as like, hey, year one of Jaden made the playoffs. Good year, everyone. All of a sudden it's like, oh shit, we're in the divisional round. Like we have a shot to go to the conference championship here in year one. So, expectations are being rapidly changed for this Commanders team. And as you yourself were one of the people shouting from the rooftops all summer that they were going to be way better than people thought, I'd like to give you an opportunity to take your victory lap.
I will take a small victory lap because Jaden's been even better than I thought he could be. I thought he could be very good as a rookie. I thought he would make more rookie mistakes. And one of the things that you highlighted is really important. He's been playing his best football in the biggest moments. If you look at his EPA, it goes up in the fourth quarter, right? Usually when rookies are starting to crumble and make mistakes and, succumb to the pressure. He's been more than he's needed to be in the fourth quarter. And that's been huge for this Commanders team. It's the reason why they're there. And wasn't just this game, certainly highlighted by this game, but all the games, big players make big plays. And they need to if you're going to win in the playoffs because the margins are tight, because the matchups are better, the opponents are better. Every possession matters more. And I'd said Terry McLaurin needs to rebound. He'd had a bad couple of weeks. He came out again in the first quarter and the second quarter. You could tell Terry was Terry. He ended up 7 for 89 with a touchdown, led all Washington receivers in catches. And Jaden, of course, did Jaden things. And I'd said, because Jaden is Jaden and he makes amazing out of nothing regularly, the Commanders have a chance. And that's literally why they won that game. Teams rode their star players. Josh looked amazingly comfortable against that very potent Broncos blitz that we talked about. He was 9 for 11, 138 passing and a touchdown, 11 total first downs against pressure looks from the Broncos. Like he looked so smooth and in control and like he had every answer to the test. Star players carried their teams in Wildcard weekend and they really sort of showed the difference between themselves and good players playing well or playing hard or whatever else. And teams that didn't have their star players step up. We'll talk about the Vikings and the Rams game. Sam Darnold, he hit a slump at the worst possible time of the year. Like the game against the Lions determined that they end up going on the road as a 14-win team, to play a playoff game. And he gets some pressure, but he gets a lot of pressure, but he also didn't do well in snaps where he had protection for 2.5 seconds.
A lot of it was kind of his fault, if we're being
I agree.
honest. Like, I get it. They allowed a ton of pressures, 24 pressures last time I checked. 11 of them were under 2.5 seconds, which is a lot. That would be like top 5 or bottom 5, I guess, however you look at it, on any given week, right? Allowing that many pressures under 2.5 seconds. But there were 13 that happened over 2.5 seconds because he was just holding the ball for too damn long. And I get it. They were doubling Jefferson and just stuff wasn't open down the field. But if it's not open and that your offensive line isn't very good in pass pro, and we've known that the entire year, especially after they lost Darisaw, get rid of it. Like, just throw it away. And he just kept making everything worse by consistently holding the ball. We had been worried at times about Darnold this year, and then, he kind of caught fire, and we're like, okay, he's figured it out. Like, this is Darnold. This is the best version of Darnold we've ever seen. And then just somehow in the last 2 weeks, he reverted to this Jets Darnold that cracked under pressure, that held the ball too long. He didn't trust his eyes. He was inaccurate. Like, I don't know how you go from willing the team to a victory in the fourth quarter against Seattle to literally being a bottom 5 quarterback by every conceivable metric over the last 2 weeks in the span of like 7 days. Like, I can't remember the last time I ever saw that happen for a quarterback who the entire year was, throwing mid-30s touchdowns and like 12 picks. Wild. Absolutely wild. He's still going to get paid in the offseason because whatever you think of Sam Darnold, he's still better than the options that a lot of these, not a lot, but several of these bottom feeder teams have. But he cost himself a lot of money these last 2 weeks because of how he cracked against the same 2 teams that he cracked against earlier this year.
Yeah, you could see the look in his eyes that looked very lost and like, I don't know what's occurring. The fact that it happened in 10 days, I saw somebody post, and I don't remember who it was, or I'd give him credit, said, Sam Darnold was really efficient. He packed the entire Eagles back half of the season collapse from last year into 2 weeks. He just got it done and out of the way. And again, it came at the worst possible time. And I feel bad for Vikings fans because they had a great run. They had a very good year, and they just didn't play their best football at the worst possible time. And now as a 14-win team, they're out in the wild card round. I do want to go on a rant, though. I am going to jump up on my soapbox.
Please do. Please do.
The Dan Campbell effect is real.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
This got talked about, but I'm going to lay it out. The teams that played the Lions, how did they perform in the week after facing Detroit?
Oh, God. It had to have been what? Like 3-15, something like that?
Here we go. So we start in week 2 because obviously we're not counting preseason here. So the Rams lost to the Cardinals in week 2. The Bucs lost to the Broncos in week 3. The Cardinals lost to the Commanders in week 4. The Seahawks lost to the Giants in week 5.
I remember that one.
Cowboys lost to the Niners, even after a bye week, because they played the Lions, then they had a bye week, then their next opponent was the Niners. They lost that one. Vikings lost to the Rams, also in week 8. Now, the Titans won, their first one to get a win in the week after playing Lions, but it was over the Patriots. And it took overtime to do it. Keep that in mind.
Half
it's
credit.
Context.
Half
credit. The Packers won, beating the Bears after a bye week, but only because they tipped a potential game-winning field goal on the road. So, again, the Packers barely beat the Bears, who were not a very good team, after playing the Lions. The Texans won versus the Cowboys in week 11. The Jags lost to the Texans, again after bye week. Third team that got a bye week after playing the Lions, and still lost. Colts won versus who? Oh, yeah, right. The Patriots again. Bears lost to the Niners in week 14. Packers won versus the Seahawks in week 15. Bills won, but against the Bills in week 16. Who was it against, though?
Patriots.
Bears lost to the Seahawks in week 17. Niners lost to the Cardinals in week 18. And Vikings lost to the Rams in the wild card round. So, sum total, teams were 6-11 in the week after they played the Lions, but 3 of those 6 victories came against the Patriots, and 1 more was Green Bay's narrow win with the field goal block, potential field goal winning block versus the Bears on the road. So 4 of those were, let's just say, very explainable wins. There's literally 2 quality-ish wins, if you want to call them that. The Texans winning over the Cowboys in week 11 and the Packers beating the Seahawks in week 15. Basically, everybody else either lost after playing the Lions because they beat the hell out of you, or they beat the Patriots.
I love how there's also multiple instances where the league acknowledged, like, we're going to give you a bye week after the Detroit game because they're going to beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
And they still lost.
It's ridiculous. I remember this being talked about in the first half of the season. Then the sort of din died down midseason. And I went in last night. I was like, what happened to that? And it's legit. It's 6-11, but it very easily could have been only 2 wins that were really counted for anything after playing Detroit.
And I don't even think it's just about the physicality. I think it's about the Lions coaching staff is so good and they game plan so well that they will expose every weakness you have for the next team on your schedule. Like that's not just a Dan Campbell stat. That's also a Ben Johnson stat. That's an Aaron Glenn stat. Like, one of the only other staffs in the NFL that I think game plans as well as they do is the Rams, who just beat Minnesota. So, I don't know if we're going to get another Matthew Stafford v. Detroit big time game in the NFC Championship, but boy, can you imagine better cinema? Stafford going back to Detroit to prevent the Lions from maybe going to their first Super Bowl. Like, oh my God, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. As an NFL storyteller,
it's still a tough task ahead of them, though, because the Rams got to take on the Eagles. We'll have that be our first game that we preview in this one. Again, LA coming off a dominant win against Minnesota. McVay cooked up an excellent game plan on offense. The young Rams D-line was vicious as usual. And, I went back and I watched the first time the Rams and Eagles played each other, which was a couple months ago at this point. That was the game that Saquon put up 255, right? And I remember going into these playoffs and I'm like, if the Rams can just avoid Philly, like, they have a really good shot here. Unfortunately, they can't avoid Philly. Not only are they going to Philadelphia, but there's also an Arctic blast that's coming down out of Canada this coming weekend. So this game's going to be in the low 20s, if I had to guess. Same thing with Kansas City. It's going to be the low 20s. Fortunately, the worst of the temperatures isn't going to be till Monday and Tuesday, but it's still going to be really darn cold. So you have a Rams defensive front, which is very good at rushing the passer, but they're a little bit light in the pants as far as stopping the run, going against a massive Eagles offensive line and Saquon Barkley. And if they get in you 3rd and short, they get you in the 4th and short, they're going to tush push you. Like, there is potential here for this to just be the same game again, right? Here's the one thing that gives me pause, though. If you go back and you watch that game and how Saquon got 255, he had 26 carries, I believe, in that game. Only 3 of them were explosive runs. So out of 26 carries, he only had 3 that went for 10 plus yards. And it was an 11-yard gain, and then he had 2 that went for 70 and 72. If you take out, which I know this sounds like such a bullshit way to do it, but if you take out those 2 giant runs, like, the rest of his runs throughout the day, it was 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, and just grinding and grinding and grinding. So LA admirably held up for a lot of these carries, but that's what Philly does, is they lean on you and they lean on you, and then eventually they just trust that Saquon's going to break one. So for me, if LA wants to avoid that, going on the road in freezing temperatures against a massive offensive line and arguably the best running back in football, the only way to really avoid that happening again is to blitz the ever-loving hell out of Philly on first down. You need to get TFLs, bring nickels off the edge, bring safeties, do whatever you got to do. Blitz, get TFLs, get them into 2nd and 9 or 2nd and 11, 2nd and 12, and take the run game off the table on 2nd and 3rd down, especially 3rd and short. Like if you can keep them to like 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 5 or later, that's where you start to see Philly they get out of their comfort zone, right? Because they live for short yardage because they're so good at it. But if you can kind of put them behind the sticks and you make them throw, which I know sounds dumb because like I do believe that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback and you have A.J. Brown, you got Devontae, you got Goddard. But like if you can get them out of just we're going to mash you with Saquon mode and you make them go toe-to-toe with you with the passing game, it's been a while since we've seen the Eagles passing game like really be able to drop back and throw it. And I kind of feel like that's their only recipe here is, hope that McVay comes up with an incredible game plan against Vic Fangio, which is easier said than done, and just keep the Eagles out of favorable downs and distances on 2nd down. If they can't do that, they will lose. Like the exact same thing will happen to them. But if they hit a lot of green lights and thread a lot of needles, there is a path to victory.
There is. And again, for those of you who are new here or following along at home, we don't share notes before we do this. I'd expect Kellen Moore to run right into the teeth of the Rams defense and basically make them bow up. Like it's what we said at the top. If you can control another team's run game, you have a chance to limit their offense. If you can't, they are going to do exactly that. They are going to lean on you. And look, the Eagles are built to do that, and they've proven they can do that and will do that. Kellen Moore has proven that he will stick with the run and run right over you. And if Jalen Hurts ends up with 12 passing attempts, he doesn't care because Saquon's going to have 200 yards and a couple of scores, and they're still going to win the game. So Cam Akers popped a few for the Vikes versus the Rams, and Saquon's a whole lot better than Cam Akers. If the Rams are getting gashed on the ground, the pass rush has got to slow way down, and the pass rush is really what carried them last night versus the Vikings and has been carrying them largely throughout the year. It is a very good defensive front, but only when they can pin their ears back and rush. If you are hammering on them with the run game, they've got to stay in. They've got to be a half step slow. They've got to be gapped sound. So I wrote... high-risk game plan for the Rams. Sell out on run blitzes to stymie Saquon and don't miss. That's where the risk comes in. The risk isn't in run blitzing. I would actually expect Kellen to expect run blitzes on early downs. I think he knows that's coming from Shula, but you can't miss. If you miss with Saquon, he is going to go 70 and you can't just erase that run. It's going to be a touchdown on the board. So if that works, and it's a big if, you then hope your young pass rush can limit them in those medium down and distance and make them uncomfortable, because when they had to pass this last weekend, that's the Eagles, their receivers didn't get open. Their receivers are really good, but their receivers were not getting open. And everybody's, dumping on Hurts and saying he didn't play very well. You look at a lot of the plays where he didn't throw it, there was nowhere to throw it. Not throwing it was a much better choice than throwing it. So that's the only way when you talk about a narrow path is, yes, the Rams have to blitz the hell out of them and say, no, you will not just continue to run over us. In doing so, they're going to not only expose themselves to gap discipline and Saquon breaking long runs, which is totally possible, but even if that works, then they're going to expose the secondary. And the secondary is going to have to hold up, right? The secondary is going to have to cover all those good receivers. Now, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. They've proven that. Is it likely? I don't think it's really likely for a bunch of the reasons that we've said. But look, the Rams are playing with nothing to lose. Nobody really thought they were going to be here. And they're the ones rolling in.
Remember, I did pick them to go to the Super Bowl in preseason. That looked real shaky for like a month and a half.
I'd say it looked real shaky for longer than that. And if you're being honest, in the middle of the season, you even said this, like, that's not looking really good right now. So a lot of people, even the ones that were on the bandwagon in the beginning, like you, jumped off midseason and said, it's just not going to be this year. It's not going to happen for him. So tremendous coaching job by McVay and his entire staff to get them here. And they do come in loose, right? They're playing for a region that's been affected by these terrible fires. They obviously, much was made of the fact they had to go on the road for their own playoff game. And nobody expected to be them to be there in the first place. So they are young, they are aggressive, they have a great coaching staff. They have a puncher's chance in this game. We're not saying they're going to get run over. Do I feel like they're going to run out of juice against a very good, very solid Eagles roster and coaching staff, if we're talking about the coordinators especially? I think they might. Like, McVay's got as good a chance as anybody with that young roster believing right now. But if they can't do the one thing, if they can't stop the Eagles run game, this is all kind of going to fall apart, because the Rams defense has this great pass rush. You obviously saw it last night. They don't really have a counterpunch. If that gets shut down, like if they don't get a chance to do that thing they do so well, there's not really anything else for them to fall on. There were some nice exotic blitzes from Shula, and we saw guys like that we've interviewed, which is a lot of fun, like Quentin Lake and Jacoby Durant coming off the edges and being more exotic pressures from the slot. That was great. I think the Eagles are going to be able to handle that a little bit more easily. And like, that's the only quote unquote counterpunch they have to just those front four rushing. And they're not going to have near as much success against the Philadelphia offensive line as they did against the Vikings offensive line.
We are kind of building an underdog entry as we go here. So I'm going to reveal the first name that we have in our division round underdog entry. Saquon higher than 18.5 for his longest rush. Now, he did that twice the last time he played against LA.
Yep.
The number is actually lower than I thought it was going to be, because I thought they would have put it somewhere in the 20s, but I am banking on Saquon being Saquon and either just making a guy miss when they bring these early down pressures, which they're going to have to bring, or if they don't bring early down pressures and he can just run behind, Mailata and Dickerson, and they're going to dig somebody out and you just give him a crease, he's going to get it, 20 yards out of that. So I feel pretty good about that one. Saquon, again, higher than 18.5 for his longest rush. If you're not familiar with doing underdog pick'ems, we do these every single week. If you would like to play along for the division round, there's actually a whole bunch of new customer specials throughout this week. Thursday and Friday is going to be Wemby. If you do basketball pick'ems, which I am terrible at, even worse than football pick'ems, so I tend to stay away from those. But Saturday is going to be Mahomes for your new customer free pick. So if you want to play along with us, you can find that at the QR code on the screen or at the link in the description below. Again, Saquon higher than 18.5 for his longest rush is our first name, and we'll reveal the rest as we go. Now, second NFC game of the slate. I can't remember which one's Saturday and which one's Sunday. I am really, really excited for Commanders-Lions because... And you just kind of talk about the Rams playing with house money. There is no team that is playing with more house money right now than the Washington Commanders. They were, even in Commanders fans' wildest dreams, not supposed to be here. This season has been one of the most successful, year ones for a new GM, head coach, quarterback trio that I can remember. Last year in Houston, where they made it to the division round, like that's the only other one that I could think of where a team with entirely new blood at the most important three spots made it this far in the postseason. Like this is rare air here. That being said, I would argue that the Commanders are in a slightly more favorable spot this year than the Texans were last year. Because the Texans, were going up against the buzzsaw that was the 2023 Baltimore Ravens. The Commanders are also going up against a buzzsaw in Detroit, and I want to say I do think Detroit is going to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some matchup problems here for the Lions, or rather for the Commanders against the Lions, that if I was a Lions fan, I would be very, very nervous about. Mm. And of course, that starts with Jaden Daniels. But before I do my little diatribe, I want to see if you wrote down the same thing again.
I bet we did on this one. So Commanders have a chance to run the ball here. Now, we all know the Lions are down defenders. That's been a storyline for most of the season. It feels like certainly the second half of the season. But in their last game versus the Vikings, They gave up 120 rushing. Akers averaged 10.8 per and Jones 4.5 per. If Washington can get Robinson rolling and, this is the big and, in conjunction, use Jaden's legs as a threat to keep them honest, because Brian Robinson, good running back, not great running back, and again, good run blocking line, but not great run blocking line. They're going to have to use the threat of Jaden, which is RRO or RPO, to really make the Lions kind of commit and miss. And if they can do that, they can establish some of that ground game. They can limit Lions possessions, limit their time on the field, grind them out a little bit. And if I was looking to do that, if I was the Commanders, if I was Cliff, I would peek across state lines at Todd Monken's game plan against the Steelers, which was exactly that, right? Okay, you're going to focus on Derrick Henry. We're going to use Lamar, right? Oh, you're going to focus on Lamar. We're going to use Derrick Henry. And Washington should have a sprinkle of that in their game plan versus the Lions. If they do, they have a chance to, again, keep this a more low-scoring affair, which definitely would favor them because the Lions have been a very high-scoring team, and I don't really feel like the Commanders have the fireworks to keep up. If we flip it around, there is one thing the Commanders have to do on defense, and one thing only at this point, which sounds weird because I just said they're a diverse and high-flying offense. They have to stop Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs has been the absolute engine of this whole thing for the last month. And if they don't stop him, that's it. It's kind of like if you're playing the Eagles and you don't stop Saquon, well, that's it. That's all we have to write. Yeah. So Gibbs has been the engine of the offense down the stretch. In the last 3 games, he's had 109, 117, and 139 yards rushing with 5 rushing TDs, 45, 46, and 31 receiving yards in those games with 1 more TD. So the average is 162 yards of offense and 2 TDs per game. Like, if you don't get a handle on that guy, and that is a very tough thing to do right now, like, your day's over. Detroit is going to run you off the field with just that. And, oh, yeah, they got a really good tight end. And, oh, yeah, they got some really good wide receivers. And, oh, yeah, their quarterback is playing very sharp football. But it really doesn't matter. It's Jahmyr Gibbs or bust. And if you can't slow him down, that's it. Game over. You're not winning against the Lions.
I don't think that the Commanders are really going to be able to stop Detroit because there's like 3 teams in the NFL that I think could even slow them down, and they ain't one of them. Like, at all. and that's like, Dan Quinn has done a great job with that defense relative to what he had to work with, the resources they did. Like, at one point, they were relying on, rookie Mike Sainristil to be an outside corner one-on-one against Jamar Chase because they had literally no other choice. They were down to like 2 outside corners. So like, this team has been banged up throughout the year. They had to figure out the secondary early on in the season on the fly. They've taken injuries in the front. Like, Deron Payne just got banged up last week with a really nasty looking dislocated finger that I don't know if you saw the x-ray, but
I did.
Horrific, right?
Yep.
So, like, Dan Quinn has been a miracle worker with what he had available to him on this defense. They don't have the firepower to stop Detroit. Like, they just don't. And so, if the Commanders either A, want to win this game, or B, and perhaps more importantly, cover, because good teams win, great teams cover. I think Detroit opened up as like a 10-point favorite in this game or something like that. If they want to go toe for toe with Detroit, it's less about stopping them and more so just about, okay, if they get 3s, we want to get 7s and just kind of turn this into a shootout. Like, it might be their only path to victory here. And so I look at what Detroit does on the back end. You were looking at the run game. I'm looking at the pass game here. Because if you're looking at how Aaron Glenn plays defense, like, he believes in his DBs. He's like, I'm going to put you in man coverage situations the entire day, and I believe in you to get it done. Whether it was, them calling 0, which is man coverage with nobody getting any help against Darnold in the last week of the season, or if you're just looking at cover 1, like straight up man coverage with a single high safety on the back end, they do that more than any other team in the league. They are 8th in doing it on first down. They are 1st in doing it on second down, and they are 1st in doing it on third down. And they're 1st by a lot on third down. And so if you're looking at the Commanders offense against a very man coverage heavy defense from Detroit. That is where there's opportunities for the Commanders here. And there's opportunities in 3 ways. A, if they're playing man coverage but not doubling Terry, I'm taking Terry against any of these Detroit corners. And that is no disrespect to them. That is just respect to Terry. He could beat any of them man to man, which is why I don't think they're not going to double Terry, because I don't think anybody else in that Washington receiver core really scares me that much. Secondly, let's say they do double Terry. So if we're calling one double jersey number on Terry, everybody else is on an island, we got a single high safety. That opens up 2 other things that could really hurt Detroit defensively, which is the screen game, because by default, that means you're getting even numbers outside. We're either getting 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. So that's going to open up the screen game for them, and we know Cliff loves that. And we can kind of augment the run game with just taking those numbers outside and tossing it out for 5 to 6 yards, or if we break a tackle, get even more. Or, and this is the X factor here, Jaden Daniels' legs. Because if you're going against man coverage, especially man coverage with Terry doubled, that means there's no resources anywhere else on the field. Everybody's back is turned because they're glued to their guy. And if everybody's back is turned and Jaden Daniels breaks the pocket, he is getting 20, 30 yards on you. He is so dynamic. So there is a path here for the Commanders to have a lot of success offensively, whether it's through the screen game, through hitting Terry on deep shots, through Jaden with his legs. Like, they can do it. They can put up 30 plus points in this game. The hard part's going to be keeping Detroit from scoring 40. And that's been the hard part for everybody this year. But if they can do that, if they can keep Detroit to 30 to 32 and they get 35, guess what? You won a playoff game. Congratulations, you're going to the conference championship. Again, will they do that? Probably not. Is that their only option? Yeah.
Yeah, they have very few paths here. It's a narrow window, and typically when you're looking at a team opening up as a double-digit point favorite, the team that's not the favorite in that game has a very thin path to victory. It's not impossible. It's difficult. You got to hit a lot of green lights. You got to have some truly dynamic plays from your very best players. And if there's one player left in these playoffs that is that guy on his team, it's Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. Mm-hmm. He is the guy that everybody on that bench turns to and goes, dude, we got to have a play. It's you. There's no question about this. It's not like, oh, is it me or is it you? No, it's you, dog. That's it. You're the guy that's going to create those points. And he's done it all year long and looked just cool as a cucumber doing it. And, again, puncher's chance. Yeah, I'm never going to say a team with him and Terry healthy does not have a chance. It's a little bit like the Texans, who we're going to talk about in a minute. If CJ and Nico are out there, you've got a shot to score points on anybody. And it's the same with Jaden and Terry. And when it really comes down to it, it's Jaden.
And speaking of Jaden, our second entry in this underdog division round pick'em, Jaden Daniels higher than 54.5 rushing. Does that not sound really generous? That sounds super generous to me, considering what we know he can do on the ground. And
he can take off and get, 20, like you said, 25 or 30 in a chunk and make it look, I'm not going to say effortless, but very, very easy. The big concern from you and many others was he takes too many hits. He took some comically large hits in college, about 6 or 7 of them.
He took one last week too, that cartoon shot on the sideline.
And they got played over and over again. I think it kind of got overblown, but he got to the league. He tried it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then he went, oh, okay, I get it. Everybody's bigger and faster. And he will sort of easily find that spot in the middle of the zone and just go down and say, hey, the most important thing is that I get to do this again. But he does, it looks like he did it after 12 yards, but with him and his speed and that ease, it's after 22 or 24. And he can do that, it seems like, at almost any given time in the game. So yeah, that seems a little bit low to me.
One quick note, and then we'll get right back to the show. You guys are very familiar with Manscaped at this point because they've supported us forever. But they did just release a brand new addition to their grooming line that you might be interested in, called the Chairman Pro, which is an old school electric foil shaver that can give you a professional shave right at home. You can use either the skin-safe 4-blade foil for a smooth finish, or if you want a stubble look, they have multiple options for the stubble trimmer to give you either a 1 to 2 day look or a 3 to 4 day look, depending on your preference. It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower if you want, and it makes it easier to clean too because you can just rinse it under the sink. It also, of course, has an LED spotlight so you can see every hair you're trying to shave, and it has up to 75 minutes of runtime. So if you're in need of a new shaver to maintain your stubble or to have a fresh and smooth face every single day, check out the Chairman Pro at Manscaped. And of course, check out everything else they have to offer too, whether it's body trimmers, lotion, shave gels, nose hair trimmers. I mean, you name it, they have it when it comes to grooming. You can see it all at manscaped.com, and if you use promo code BOOTLEG, you'll also get a 20% off discount and free shipping on your order. Again, that is manscaped.com, promo code BOOTLEG. That will give you 20% off and free shipping on whatever you get. Thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring today's show, and with that, let's get back to it. Third game on the docket, Texans Chiefs. We who are about to die salute you, EJ.
Oh, I already
not
died.
looking good. Look, the Texans have one shot. You know, we talk about the one path to victory that a lot of these underdogs have, because you know, anything can happen in the division round. But usually, if you're an underdog, it's you need the game to go your way, or you just don't have a chance. The Texans' one shot here is their pass rush, which we know is one of the best in the NFL when they get going. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry. Like, when they get all lathered up, there's maybe 2 offensive lines in the NFL that stand a chance. The Chiefs, oddly enough, when they had Joe Thuney at left tackle, were one of them. Like, Joe Thuney, the last 3 weeks, when they had the starters playing, when they moved him out to left tackle because DJ Humphries, who they signed off the street, and he played for a game, then he immediately got hurt, had a hamstring injury. They put Joe Thuney out at left tackle because they're like, we don't really have any other choice. And all of a sudden, Joe Thuney was like their best left tackle. And so I'm not 100% sure if they're going to do that again in the playoffs because Andy Reid's playing at Coy. But DJ Humphries is healthy again. So oddly enough, if the Chiefs continue to put Thuney at left tackle, I really don't think the Texans have a chance here because he's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. You know, he can keep Pat clean enough to the point where he can do Pat things. And, you know, you still have Creed, you still have Trey. Like, I really think that kind of neutralizes the Texans' one advantage in this game is the pass rush if Thuney's at left tackle. However, if Thuney's back at guard and Humphries is at left tackle, now we got a ball game here. Because Humphries, I do not think has a shot against Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Like, I really don't think he does. And, you know, Danico Autry, who they rush him inside a lot. Like, that's going to be a war between him and Trey. Like, I can't wait to watch that. But if you're looking at Pat in the first, 14 weeks of the season before Thuney, was their best / emergency left tackle. If you're looking at those first 14 weeks, and this is, again, going to sound like a very dense, stupid, cherry-picked stat, but trust me, it matters playing against the Texans specifically. This season, among all quarterbacks who face a 4-man rush that generates pressure in 2.5 seconds or less, again, this first 14 weeks of the season before Joe Thuney was left tackle, just so everybody's on the same page. 4-man rush, pressure under 2.5 seconds. Patrick Mahomes, had the 3rd most dropbacks under those circumstances because his tackles were that bad. Like, the interior was great. Tackles were terrible. So not only did he have the 3rd most dropbacks in those situations, but he was 24th in passer rating, 27th in adjusted completion percentage, 29th in yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, 5 total turnover-worthy plays. He was not good when you could get to him with 4 and take advantage of those tackles. That was one of the big reasons why we were so frustrated with Kansas City, because we're like, they should be better than this. Pat should be better than this. But his left tackle situation was just that bad. And they had to rely on I don't want to say smoke and mirrors, but smoke and mirrors, like, to just kind of will themselves to the first seed anyway, because they're fucking Kansas City, and that's just what they do. But I worry for the Chiefs if they're going back to how their team was put together in those first 14 weeks with bad left tackle play. against this Texans pass rush, I worry that they're going to stall out just like they were. And with CJ starting to catch fire again and the run game starting to catch fire again and the Texans interior offensive line playing better again, Nico's still Nico. Again, it's a slim chance that Houston wins on the road here. But is it unfair to say that the Tooney decision kind of determines who wins here and where they put him on the offensive line?
It certainly feels like it. You said, that there's one key. I added in the one that I already spoke about, which is Stroud to Nico. Like, Stroud to Nico is a special connection in this league and gives the Texans a chance on offense. Now, they've got to find Nico a few, not one, not two, but a few chunks versus a Spagnuolo defense. That's tough to do. That's easier said than done. And Spags is going to come ready. He is one of the best game planners in the NFL, and he's one of the best big game planners in the NFL. So he knows that this is by far not his first rodeo. He's going to come trying to shut that down, and it's going to be tough for Bobby Slowick to find a way to pry them loose. If they don't get Nico loose, I don't really think they have a chance. And my second was the same as yours. They have to abuse the Chiefs blocking with their pass rush, because their pass rush, as the Texans, is a strength, and make Mahomes uncomfortable. Now, it doesn't mean sack him necessarily. He did roll his ankle. Yeah, it did roll his ankle. He seems to be superhuman in his ability to heal as well, so I'm not accounting for any slowing down, but you got to make him test it. You got to see if the range of motion in that ankle is any less than usual, just a little bit. Make him cut, make him sprint out of the pocket. Maybe see if he's just a tick slower than his usual, I will get just enough to get past the sticks self. Like, if he's 10% slower, he might not get a few of those first downs. And if the Texans can't do both of those things, get Nico some shots on offense and abuse with their pass rush, I think the Chiefs are going to do their regular boa constrictor thing and crush the life out of them and move on, because they are one of the best postseason teams of this era with no question whatsoever. So I think the Texans have to do both of those things. And if they do, then they have that slim chance. If they fail to do either one, I don't think they win on the road.
You could saw Pat's foot off.
Correct.
And I still think he would get a 12-yard run on 3rd and 11.
Yes.
Like, he would just one hop it the entire way and magically be faster than everybody. So whether he's injured or not, I don't even think it matters, because that dude, he almost gets better when he's hurt. Like, he has that like Ben Roethlisberger type quality where it's like, oh, my nose broke. I'm more accurate now. I will never be able to explain it, but I think it was Nick Wright who said couple of years ago, the best quarterback on planet Earth is Patrick Mahomes, and the second best quarterback on planet Earth is Patrick Mahomes with one leg. I truly believe that too. So, he didn't have a great year this year overall, and we kind of talked about some of the reasons for that. Losing Rashee Rice early, lost Hollywood for most of the year. They were trying to bring along Xavier Worthy. He's starting to click, over the last month or so. Travis had, his adventures over summer and did not look to be in game shape until after Halloween. But now Travis is Travis. And the left tackle issues. Like, there's a bunch of reasons why Mahomes had a truly down year. And I kind of don't care. Like, I don't care. It's January. We said after the Super Bowl last year that I wasn't going to pay that much attention to the Chiefs in the regular season, and I really didn't care about them until January, and I stuck to that. Like, we talked about them here and there, but did we ever really count them out? No. Like, we still were like, yeah, they're going to be there in at least the division round, and if Pat's breathing, they're probably going to go to the conference championship game, and we'll talk about it at that point. But now we're at that point, and even with all their struggles, I'm still thinking, like, yeah, conference championship. Yeah, Super Bowl. Because nothing seems to matter with this team. Like, it doesn't matter how, quote unquote, bad they play. You look up at the end of the game and they got more points. You can question the methods for how that happened, but it happens a lot. So, I don't know. Until proven otherwise, they're still it. They're still the team to beat.
Fully agree. It's what we said at the end of the summer was don't really care. They're going to find a way. There's the clip of, Mahomes walking off against the Texans and he goes up to CJ and says, see you guys in the playoffs. Like, yep. See you tomorrow, Frank. They knew this was coming and now it's here and we fully expect the Chiefs to be the playoff Chiefs. And I think the most surprising result of the weekend, or certainly the past 2 weeks, would be the Chiefs coming out really flat and even leaving this to be a game to late in the game. Like, even if that happens, I still think they're winning. But if they really don't look like the Chiefs, or they really look like the bye week slowed them down, which never seems to happen. They usually get the bye week and they don't seem to come out particularly slow. They still win those games. If they didn't, I think that would be the most surprising thing of the weekend.
That is the one thing that I'm kind of curious about, of like, when does rest turn into rust?
Yeah.
Because we're going to like a month or at least 3 weeks since the Chiefs have like played a game that mattered. Right?
Yeah,
because they sat everybody in the last season or the last week.
Mahomes has not thrown a pass since Christmas.
So like, if there's one team or one reason why this team might come out flat, it's because of that. But also at the same time, I feel like Andy wouldn't have done that. Like, I don't think he wouldn't have rested everybody unless he was supremely confident in their ability to still lock in and come out firing, right? Because he's been around the block so many times at this point. Yeah. He's had enough playoff buys at this point that like he knows how his team responds. So I trust him on it. But I am fascinated to see the rest versus rust thing, because it's been a while for them. Like, it's been a long, long time. All right. Before we move on, I do have 2 names for you for the underdog division round entry here. The first one, Will Anderson, higher than half a sack, because I am in my head banking on, okay, we're getting DJ Humphries out there. Will Anderson's going to win that matchup all day. Xavier Worthy, you and I have had a complicated past with Xavier Worthy, right? I am going higher on his longest reception than 20.5 yards. I don't know how many catches he's going to get, because Stingley and Lassiter are one of the best CB duos in the entire NFL. But with Xavier Worthy, it kind of only takes one. And I feel like Andy has known for a while, like, hey, it's very likely we're playing Houston, second round. We just played them on Christmas. Like, I know what D'Amico's going to do. I'm very familiar with his defense. I faced it several times at this point. Let me see if I can find a way to just scheme up a good look for my young kid that runs 4.2. Because Stingley and Lassiter are both tremendous. They can't just run with him hip for hip, right? So if they can scheme up, whether it's off motion or hiding him in a stack or a bunch, just something to get him a free release where he can just run, I really think that there's a shot opportunity here for Xavier Worthy. And I'd be willing to bet that he's going to hit it, because it's January and it's the Chiefs and they always hit those. Like, MVS couldn't catch for 4 months out of the year. Get to January, all of a sudden he's friggin' DeAndre Hopkins, who also, ironically, on the Chiefs this year. Fun little revenge plot, right? Like, former Texan facing the Texans playoffs. B story here. But either way, I feel like Xavier Worthy's going to get schemed up shot opportunities. I think they're going to hit at least one. So give me higher than 20.5 yards, Xavier Worthy, longest catch.
Yeah, it only takes one. And the question is, can they get him free? And, weather's going to play into it a little bit. It's going to be really cold. Ball's going to be really hard. It's tougher to complete long passes in those situations. Does that mean it won't happen? No, it just means it's difficult to do. And like you said, there is enough creativity on the Kansas City offensive staff to find a way to pry him loose once or twice to get him clean looks and then see if you can just hit it.
Now, last game on the docket, the game that everybody's looking forward to the most, Bills-Ravens. I can't remember if this is Sunday Night Football. It probably will be, because it should be. But this is the one that everybody's just been looking forward to for a couple weeks at this point, ever since we kind of understood what the seeds were going to be. Allen, Lamar, top 2 MVP candidates. Again, MVP's already been voted on. This game will not have any bearing on who actually wins the award, but people will pretend that it does. But they've been on a collision course to meet in this round, and now we're getting it. And as excited as I am for them to go back and forth, blow for blow, truly the thing I'm most looking forward to is the trench play. Because when these two teams met earlier in the year, week 4, Baltimore just blew them off the map. Like immediately, like 87-yard run, first play, Derrick Henry housed it. It was 14-0, then 21-0 before you could even blink. And at that point, game script was altered in the middle 2 quarters of the game. You know, Buffalo was only running the ball 24% of the time because they were so far behind so early, because Lamar was so brilliant so early. And you and I know this Bills offense at this point. Like, they want to run the ball a lot more than 24% of the time. There has been a complete philosophical shift on this team to being a hard-nosed, ground and pound. James Cook is our engine. When they got off that script against Baltimore, like, they were completely flailing in the wind. They had no shot in that game. Fast forward to now, where they have truly established their identity. They have a massive offensive line. They have a tremendous young running back. They put 6 offensive linemen on the field, more than anybody, specifically to run the ball with that running back. I feel like as long as the Bills defense can just put up a little bit of a fight early on to prevent Lamar from doing Lamar things and putting them into a negative game script, as long as they can keep it relatively even and let their run game actually shine through, Buffalo should be fine in this game. But if they let Lamar do those Lamar things in the first 3 drives of the game, again, and it's either 21-3 like it was in that game, or it's 21-10 even, and they force Buffalo to go into more of a pass-heavy posture, which shockingly is not what they want to do, even though they have Josh Allen, I would be really, really worried for Buffalo in those circumstances. But again, as excited as I am for the quarterback matchup here, it's Bills offensive line versus Ravens defensive line, and a Ravens offensive line versus Bills defensive line. Like, that's really what I am most intrigued by, because that was what made that game go sideways the first time.
It's such a cool game. It's not just the quarterbacks. It's that we get to see 2 teams absolutely rolling at the height of their powers, playing as well as we've seen either of them play in the past couple of seasons on both sides of the ball. And that's so rare coming to these matchups as we look at the 4 main units, offense versus defense on each team. Usually there's one unit that's kind of the kid that lives under the stairs, right? You're like, well,
Bills defense.
we'll not think about that. But
yeah,
this is 2 very powerful and well-balanced teams facing off with everything on the line. You talked about career defining, you talked about season defining, you talked about legacy defining, and whether one of them goes on, to possibly represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, which is very likely. Buffalo is going to try and get Cook rolling, and we said that they were going to have to get Cook rolling against the Broncos, and that might be difficult. Didn't turn out to be that difficult against the Broncos, and as a result, the Bills rolled. It's going to be much more difficult against the Ravens. Ravens' last 3 games, they've given up 58, 56, and 29. That is 48 yards a game rushing on average. We talked about the amazing turnaround that the Baltimore defense have had since midseason. It's going to be difficult. It is absolutely what Joe Brady and this offense want to do. They are equipped to do it. We will see when they run up against a very immovable force, at least in the second half of the season, in terms of that Ravens defensive line. The good thing, the trump card, if you want, is that Buffalo, if forced to get away from the run game, has now created this incredibly balanced offense where nobody needs to star on any given week. We're talking about, the last game with CJ and Nico. Like, if it's not Nico, who's it going to be for the Texans? Well, it doesn't have to be one person for the Bills. Samuel, Shakir, Kincaid, Knox, and Hollins all had big catches against the Broncos. So it can be anybody on any given week. And Josh is seeing those options as well or better than he has at any point in his career and hitting them. Like, he's on the easy button right now. He's on the I have the answers to the test before you give it. He looked as relaxed and comfortable hitting those options as I've seen him in his career. So he's at the height of his powers. If they can't get Cook rolling, which is absolutely what they want to do, they still have hope in this game offensively because, look, they have lots of players that Josh can go to, and Josh is still Josh. He can still create on his own at the highest level in the league. So the Ravens, for their part, are going to try and knock Buffalo out with the thing that's knocked Buffalo out for the last couple of years. Run defense, right? They are going to try and run them over. And the Bills famously have not been able to stop it, especially in the playoffs. Last couple of years, this defense is a little bit different, but so is this Ravens offense. Again, we just talked about it earlier in the podcast, how good Derrick Henry is, how good the blocking game is. And if you don't get that, then you've got Lamar as a threat to run or being just so easily accurate. It's almost unfair. People have said video game like for a lot of years talking about Lamar's production. Looking at the accuracy of where he's hitting those passes as a third option, they'll go run pass option. He'll decide pass first step, first option's not there, rolls out the other way and just flicks it. And it's
from
right
any arm slot too.
Yeah. Just flicks it. And it's immediately there. It's got zip on it. It's where the receiver can use it and isn't going to take a hit. And it happens over and over and over again. And I just don't know how you stop that at that point. If you can narrow it down to, we're going to put the ball in Lamar's hands. Yeah. And then what's he going to do with it? And the answer is you don't know, and you can't stop everything. It's a huge task for the Buffalo defense, but sorry, job one is job one. If you don't stop Derrick Henry, I don't really care about the rest of it.
And that's exactly why they brought in Derrick Henry, right? Because the criticism with Baltimore, not just even last year, I would say even before that, was, hey, you have a dominant run game and you're in the playoffs, run the ball, right? And they would become too Lamar reliant. And I know that sounds dumb because it's like, well, yeah, the MVP quarterback, you should rely on him. And it's like, well, in the playoffs, again, when you're talking about, time working different in playoff football and number of possessions going down, and there's just so much pressure on each and every play because your season is over if you don't execute it perfectly. If you put all of that pressure onto one guy, even the most valuable player in the NFL, when you have a perfectly fine, if not elite run game with a future Hall of Fame running back, what are you paying him all that money for if you're not going to make the MVP's job easier, right? And that was the criticism with Baltimore, was even when they had not Derrick Henry, but other great running backs, they would just go long stretches of time, even in a neutral game script, just not running the ball. And we're like, guys, what are we doing here? Running got you here. And I feel like they brought in Derrick Henry almost to force themselves to look at this giant hulking human being on the sidelines and almost reminding them before every single drive, oh yeah, we should call his number. Because it's kind of hard to forget about Derrick Henry when he's on the field, right? So I think they just got to stick to it, even if they don't have success early on, which, they did the last time, again, 87 yards right out the gate. Even if they don't have success early on, they should stick with it, because if there's anything that we've known Derrick Henry to do, it's to just grind and grind and grind. Then you look up in the third quarter and he's got 17 carries for 90 yards. Then he's breaking a 20-yard and he's breaking a 30-yarder. He ends up with a $150 by the fourth quarter. And you're like, all right, we win. You and I saw that live in Tennessee when the Titans came to play the Seahawks. And we were like, they're getting nothing with Derrick. And then you get to overtime and he's breaking a giant run. It's like, Derrick's the reason they won. That is his career. You might as well take advantage of it. I have another note on the Bills offense, and this is just something I'm so giddy for, right? This is just the nerd in me. So the Bills had an average yards before contact per attempt last week of 2.0 yards, second only to the Eagles, because they have a giant hulking offensive line.
Yeah.
When running right, that was behind McGovern and Osiris Torrance. McGovern's 320 at center. Osiris Torrance is 350. When running behind them, it was 2.7 yards before contact per attempt, tops in the NFL. So they just drive people off the ball. And that has been their calling card, especially over the back half of the season, post Amari trade. We are getting James Cook going. We're running behind our beef. And it's worked for them. It even worked against Denver. I wasn't sure it was going to work against Denver,
Yep.
but it definitely did. And that was my mistake in thinking Denver was going to cover, was not realizing like, oh, there's a lot more tonnage on the line of scrimmage behind Buffalo than there was for the Broncos. Can't say the same thing for Baltimore, right? Because, okay, we have maybe the biggest right guard in the NFL at 350. He's going to be directly going against Michael Pierce, who's 355. In actuality, he's probably 360 plus. He's going against Travis Jones, who's 340 plus. Baltimore is the only team that can match, sides of beef for sides of beef on the line of scrimmage there. So I'm excited as a neutral fan to just watch the physics unfold here, because that's a lot of big dudes running into each other. I cannot wait to see how Buffalo runs the ball, if they can run the ball. We know they're going to try to, and as long as the game script stays neutral, I'd be willing to bet James Cook is going to be the focus here.
Yeah, whole lot of nasty going on down low in this game on both sides, and it's going to be really fun to watch, because whoever wins that particular battle on either side is probably going to take this game, and you can throw the rest out the window. And yes, there's all the dynamism at quarterback and the other skill positions and everything else, but this one is built for old school. We're going to run the football. And a lot of people didn't realize that about the Bills offense as it changed. That was one of the major changes that Joe Brady brought. And he did it sort of in phases. It didn't happen all at one time. They ran a little bit more at the end of last year and looked better doing it. And this year thought, oh, well, maybe that's the new balance. Well, no, that was the starting point. And he cranked the knob up even further. And we've seen them get up into, 60-ish% run splits. And it is the thing they want to do, the thing they want to establish. And against most teams, like you said, they'll just bring in a sixth offensive lineman. They're not trying to hide it. And they're just going to roll over you. Well, enter Baltimore with their wall on the other side. And it's going to be a fascinating game for folks that like line play. I don't care if you like offensive line play or defensive line play, because you're going to get to take your pick from either side.
Now, speaking of picks, our last member of our division round pick'em slate here. And again, I'll recap the whole thing. James Cook, higher than 55.5 rushing, which sounds like a very low number for James Cook, but that is just completely out of respect for the Baltimore defensive front. They have been crushing people for the last 2.5 months. So again, I'm worried about it, but James Cook, you give him like a couple creases, he can get you pretty close to 55.5. So I'm just trusting Osiris Torrance here to give me at least a couple of those creases, even against Pierce, even against Jones, Namdi, like that whole Ravens front. It's going to be tough, but I think they can do it. So to recap the entire entry, Will Anderson, higher than half a sack. Xavier Worthy, higher than 20.5 yards for his longest reception. James Cook, higher than 55.5 rushing. Saquon, higher than 18.5 for his longest rush. And Jaden Daniels, higher than 54.5 rushing yards. If you want to tail that, of course, you can find that at the QR code on the screen or at the link in the description. Use promo code BOOTLEG. You get up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses, as well as a free pick for a new customer offer. Again, Wemby is for Thursday and Friday. Patrick Mahomes at higher than half a passing yard is for Saturday. And Josh Allen, speaking of Josh Allen, is higher than half a passing yard for Sunday as your free pick offer. Okay. EJ, before we get out of here, any final words?
Next time we talk to y'all, we will down to the final 4 teams for this year's Super Bowl contenders. Going to be really fun, but I don't want to skip over this weekend because it is one of my favorite weekends of the year in sports.
I actually forgot to pick the Buffalo-Baltimore game.
I'm
going to go
luck.
Baltimore? I don't feel good about it.
You're going to pick whoever wins the line of scrimmage, which is, it sounds like a cop-out, but it's really not. We identified that as the key point of the game for both sides, right? It's the same point. You can turn it around and say, if they win the line of scrimmage, they win the game. Well, same thing on the other side. And it'll be really interesting to watch. I feel bad for the fan base that loses, and that's either fan base. It's Bills and Ravens both deserve to move on. They can't. That's the nature of the playoffs. It's only going to be one team. They're both very good teams this year and very deserving. It's going to be a war. It's going to be fun football.
So do you have a pick, or are you just rooting for both teams to have fun?
Nah, I love watching football, and honestly, this is the game. Like, this is the mountaintop game. If I had to pick sort of one game to watch pretty much for the whole season, I'd pick this one. This one's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm right there with you. This is the game I've been most looking forward to ever since I started playing with the playoff machine, like around week 14, week 15. I was hoping that we would get this weekend, and we got it. So thank you all for listening and watching, wherever you happen to be listening and watching. Thank you to Manscaped. Thank you to Homage. Thank you to all of our executive producers over on the Bootleg Patreon, Fitzy, Connor, Eichen, Liam, and Mike. Once again, appreciate all you boys for riding with us and supporting us for this long. I got nothing else for you, so we will see you at some point next week. Later.